All right. I think we could get started. Um, Good morning, afternoon, or evening to everyone here, depending on where you are. And welcome to today's webinar on the Hershey Income Accelerator Program. This webinar is the final webinar of 2025 for our VACS Community of Practice series, bringing together experts and practitioners working on vision for adapted crops and soils initiatives. Today, we're exploring an innovative whole system approach to increasing economic resilience for cocoa farming households through the Hershey Income Accelerator program, which demonstrates the potential of public-private partnerships. We're delighted to have participants joining us from around the world. Please feel free to add any questions or comments in the chat during the presentation, and at the very end of the presentation, we'll do our best to get to all of them. Now, before we dive into our presentation, I'm honored to introduce Daniela Vega, our Acting Executive Secretary, who will share a few words about the partnership and the importance of today's discussion. Daniela, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you, everyone. And I see that people are keep joining the session. So welcome, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending where you're joining from. Welcome to the last webinar of the 2025 of the VACS Community of Practice. 2025 has been a challenging year. Major shifts in our business have happened in our sector. Nonetheless, the Opportunity Crops and Soils Movement, or the Vision for Adapted Crops and Soils, VACS, the vision has kept evolving, growing, and we are so excited that more and more we hear every day about new initiatives that are emerging. So VACS has had presence and participation in key global events that have enriched the conversation this year, including the Africa Food Systems Forum, Climate Week in New York, World Food Prize, World Food Forum, COP30, and many, many more. So these initiatives have emerged, many initiatives have emerged, and as ever, partnerships are crucial to keep advancing the key objectives of VACS. Multi-stakeholder collaborations, like the one that we're going to hear today from Hershey and Rainforest Alliance, in advancing VACS goals around climate-adapted crops and soil health, remain part of the core and what we need to have more and more. Hershey's is one of our VACS champions, and we are so excited to have these two-part or two series webinar, one today and one more early next year. Your continued engagement through our community of practice webinars to share innovative approaches and learnings is highly encouraged. So if you have a topic that you would like to share with everyone, please make sure to send an email to the VACS partnership. Ashley will help me to put the VACS partnership email in the chat, and we will include it in the 2026 calendar to be able to share more with the community of practice. VACS is more alive than ever, despite the adversities, which speaks very highly of everyone's commitments, everyone's commitment, everyone who is online, to keep the opportunity crops and soils at the center of the conversation. For those who celebrate the holiday season, may this be a great period of celebrations for you, and looking forward to more to come in 2026. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for today's presenters and participants for your engagement with the VACS community. Back to you, Ashley.
Thank you so much, Daniela, for the remarks on the FAO CIMMYT CGIAR partnership and the important work that's being done to promote diverse, nutritious, and climate-adapted crops grown in healthy soils. So now I'm excited to introduce our presenters for today, Angela Tejada Chavez from the Hershey Company and Jesse Baker and Kate Allender from the Rainforest Alliance. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon or good morning or good evening, depending where you join us from. Thank you to the VACS team for the invitation. It's an honor to be here today, and I had not realized this would be the last webinar that you had in 2025, so we are going to make it work for you. Just a little bit of background before I go in. Thanks for pronouncing my names. That not many people can do that. So that's indeed, as you can guess by my name, I was born in Peru. But I have not lived in Peru for almost half of my life by now. I have been working in supply chains for almost 20 years, if you count alpacas, but the majority of my life has been dedicated to cocoa. Soil is something that is very close to my heart for a couple of reasons, for the work that we are doing and that we are hoping to bring it to life and sharing what works and what doesn't work as well. But also because my own grandfather was a farmer and back in Peru. He was a grower of vegetables. So he will mostly focus in the areas where we lived in the south of Peru, was mostly about tomatoes, potatoes, and vegetables, so annual crops only. And I didn't know it back then, but when he was taking me to visit the farm or to visit the farms of his workers, because that was we used to turn around on the weekends and visit a lot of people. He was always teaching me and showing me how is it that soil needed to be taken care of. And I remember being very little and him talking to me like how important it was that we needed to let the soil, the land rest. And in our culture, in our indigenous culture in Peru, we even have rituals to celebrate the harvest. And the harvest and the ritual ultimately was about giving a chance for the soil to breathe before the next cycle. And all along, I learned so many things from him that I didn't know that's what we will be calling today more sustainable or more regenerative agricultural practices. So my journey was a little bit different, where I was so privileged to learn this from my grandfather and seeing how we will apply this in the farms themselves, to later on go on my personal development journey and learning about sustainable land management and realizing that some of these practices was what he was trying to teach me. But somehow, as we enter the agricultural revolution as a society, as we enter and started introducing technology to improve productivity and to get the maximum output from the land, we kind of miss the balance. And when we had to launch the Income Accelerator program, that, as its name says, is meant to increase income, we saw the opportunity to also improve the soil. And we saw the opportunity to link this desire for improving cocoa farmers' income, also couple that with improvements of the soil and not the cocoa itself. I'm not going to go into all the details, but what it's important to know on the Income Accelerator program is our signature program. We started in 2023, and our initial goal is to reach 5,000 cocoa farming families, with support, and ultimately what we want to get to is individual investment plans for each of these 5,000 farming families. And not only that, but this is accompanied with cash transfers that are conditional to the adoption of agricultural practices, one of them being soil health. And it also has other elements regarding our due diligence that I'm not going to bore you with all of the details. But when we started, we had a choice. We could continue to pay cash incentives based on the cocoa output and the volume that was coming out from the farmers today. But as we were working with Rainforest Alliance, our selected partner for this journey, we realized if we do that, there's two things that are going to happen. One is that it's going to proportionally benefit the farmers that are already better off and with a stronger yield and with higher farm size. And yes, they are going to be better, but it's going to disproportionately benefit those that are already in a better off position, comparatively speaking. But the second thing that it was going to do, it was not going to allow us to go back to the basics. And cocoa is the tree and it's in the soil. And I know that I'm saying basic things to a very educated group, but I'm just talking about from a business point of view and how is it that we were able to link these two needs together. And that was the opportunity. We are all very clear on the challenges. Daniela did a great quick intro in what challenges we are facing. And what we are hoping to show is that there are ways that we can turn these challenges into opportunities. And that's what we hope to cover today. So as we move on, sorry, I'm trying to move to the next slide. I will give you a little bit more here, but the main takeaway from this slide is we are not doing this alone. I already spoke a little bit more like what is it that the program is trying to do, but if I pointed out, we were very clear on the need to partner. And as you see here, I really like the graphic here that you see on the right, that is ultimately we recognize that families are at the center, but they are not the only ones that need this support. But for today's focus, we are going to talk about the work that we do on farm, although we also do some soil improvement actions at the community level, but that will be for our next opportunity. So last one in this slide, which was also very important for us, is if you see here on the left-hand side in the other part, in the partners, we have the implementing partners, but we also felt that it was critical to have share our learnings with the local authorities. And in this case, because the program is implemented in Côte d'Ivoire, this will be the Conseil du Café Cacao. So just to sum it up, the opportunity was to look at the challenge of income, link that to the improvements that ultimately will help the family farming household to be better off at the end of the project. And what we saw was that we could truly look into the soil and not only at the cocoa trees. With that, unless I think there is instructions for the questions, so I'm not gonna mess that up. But with that, I'm gonna hand over to, do you want me to take this one, Jessie, and then hand over to you? Just check it. Okay, I'll take this one. Thank you, Kate, for preparations. Where this is also, the program is, I spoke about the farm and what we do with the family, but there is a reality that these farms do not exist in isolation, and the farmers in Ivory Coast are part of the cooperative. So complementing what we do with the farmers, we also enter into long-term supply agreements with the cooperative, which was a first of a kind, where Hershey has a tripartite agreement between Hershey, Sukden, our supplier, and 9 cooperatives in Côte d'Ivoire. The reason to mention this is for twofold. One is, again, if we want to drive change, we cannot only look at the farm or at the family or at the community, but we need to look at the supply chain as well. But the second reason to mention this is that this has also generated more engagement from the cooperatives in supporting the activities that we want to put forward. VSLAs refer to the Village Savings and Loans Association. Those are right now being implemented by CARE primarily. And the reason that we brought it into the context of the program is for 2 reasons. It helps people with financial literacy. And financial literacy, as everybody knows, is needed to make choices on investments at the farm level. And the second reason was because it comes with an element of joint decision making. The parallel example that we always use when we speak about our work is nobody, or at least as far as we can tell, is to make the level of investments that we are asking farmers. Sometimes we are talking about investments that go beyond their annual total revenue and income. So it's a little bit unrealistic to think that they are going to be able to go along that journey without bringing their whole family along. And last but not least, we also have pure implementing on the agroforestry side, but I will leave that to Ray and to Jessie to walk us through a little bit more of the details. So with that, Jessie, this is a nice segue. I'm going to hand over to you so you take us away a little bit more on the array side of things.
Thank you so much, Angela. And thanks again to VACS for organizing this session and for everyone from the community of practice for having the interest and time to join today. So really, because now we see this more robust program, I mean, this goal of economic resilience requires a huge amount of activities to move the needle on, right? It is very lofty, and the theory of change in this program is really built around farmer agency and long-term success. So the focus for today will mostly be on the interventions on farm, but not just the regenerative agriculture methodology and the conditionality of the cash transfers, but how we utilize behavioral economics to motivate on-farm practice change and build for a regenerative future that supports economic resilience. We want these farmers to have an opportunity for living income, as Angela said. But it is a very ambitious goal. So a little bit of context before I kind of walk through the process on the farms in the Hershey Income Accelerator program. The methodology behind what we use is called the adoption observation. They are, as the name implies, an observation-based data collection methodology. And it's essentially these 21 points rated as good, medium, or bad based on a set of strict criteria and highly contextualized criteria for specific crop and region. They're segmented into these categories, but highly interconnected. And together they describe husbandry practices and the physical condition of a farm plot, which allows us to diagnose the current state in terms of productivity potential, but also regenerative potential. Because as Angela said, we're not just looking at productivity in a no-sum win game, right? We want to be looking at productivity in a way that can sustain a farming family's income and also the soils and biodiversity for a long period of time. So history here, the AOs were developed in 2013, 2014 by Mars. Rainforest Alliance has since expanded them. We came into collaboration in 2015. We now have them in tea, coffee, and oil palm, built out from the initial set of 9. We kind of steward them in line with the originator's principles and guidelines to ensure they're updated every 3 years based on the latest agronomic science and research. But really to kind of simplify, because I know we have people with science backgrounds on this call and part of this community, this is really built on the premise of if you don't know the condition of the farm, you don't know what the problems are. If you don't know what the problems are, you can't deliver a solution. And you need to look at all of the problems to organize solutions and prioritize different interventions. And why we use this methodology in an economic resilience, in a living income-based project, is because everything is oriented to, can smallholder farmers hit a living income with primary crop, and in this case, cocoa in West Africa? So do we have confidence that smallholder farmers can reach 1.5 metric tons of cocoa on 1 hectare of land? Yes. Does this mean we can bring every smallholder cocoa farmer in Hershey's supply chain to a living income just on productivity? No. Approximately 46% of smallholders in West Africa don't have enough acreage. Like if we just look at acreage alone to meet this target, which is why this program and all the activities and kind of interventions that Angela described are so critical. We need the complementarity of other activities through care, working on income generating activities and entrepreneurship, as well as pure on agroforestry to come in and look at agroforestry not just from the perspective of, okay, are these trees helping to contribute to the optimal shade for cocoa productivity and also contribute to the nutrients in the soil, but can we also look at fruiting species that deliver income outside of the main crop for farmers? So really the big point I want to get across here, because you can see a lot of the elements that we have on soil, is the centering of the farmer and what is needed for their future in all of this. Whoops, one too many. Let me just go back. So just to walk through, like what does it look like for farmers in the HIAP, in the Hershey Income Accelerator program? So we start with onboarding. So our partners, Sucton, ETG, Beyond Beans, and the cooperatives we work with, again, as Angela mentioned, our target is 5,000 farmers. We have 5,000 farmers onboarded into the program now. They're spread across multiple cooperatives in Cote d'Ivoire. So we first organize the farm and farming families, socialize to the program, check interest and participation. And what's important to call out here is we're not just registering farmers, we're doing identity verification, phone number registration. It's different from the classic approach because we're issuing payments. And it's really important that, which you'll see, to connect the behavior change that's happening on farms to the planning, to the payment, and the behavioral incentive, we need to ensure that the farmers involved in the program are actually getting their money, right? And through this process, we've had 100% cash transfer receipt success rate thus far, which is pretty impressive given the rural conditions that we work in these communities. So after a farm is onboarded, they are assigned a coach. And I just want to qualify, in the development space, I think we often use a lot of the same words to mean different things. So coaches in HIAP are not agronomists, right? They're actually members of the community. And we walk them through our training program, which focuses on basic agronomy, on the adoption observation, but also is infused with nonviolent communication. So why this is important is it's critical in establishing trust, and we use it as a focus of restoring the dignity of farmers as partners in this journey for improvement. So of course, all of us from the environmental space want to see regeneration, want to see healthy soils. We want to see a diverse, thriving agroforestry ecosystem. But in order to do that, we have to partner with farmers. And so this focus is really on restoring dignity, and not dictating good or bad, right practice, wrong practice. It's about like, how can we reach quality that fits a future where you can have a living income. So our coaches really focus on that. They're also trained in our data collection tool, but their role is technical and motivational. So this first visit, they are plotting homogeneous areas of the farm with the farmer, looking at areas where then we know one intervention that we prescribe will be relevant for this full plot. It might not be relevant for the full farms. And that's why it's important for us to kind of divide out these homogeneous areas. But during the diagnostic visit, the coach will walk around with the farmer, kind of observe different practices. And as I mentioned, we want farmers to understand the value of the practices, what it means for their future, what it means for the economy of their household. And so how we do this in an NVC way is, instead of like looking at pruning, right, and saying like, okay, the pruning's bad, you need to improve pruning. What a coach would do is say, okay, I see some branches touching each other. Have you noticed that? Okay, yeah, you have, right? So we've learned from agronomy that this can limit the number and size of pods. Pods are critical for cocoa production critical for income, right? So there's a click there. So let's try to reduce the amount of chou-ponce and open up the canopy so more sunlight can reach the soil, and we have a little bit more activity in microbial life. So with that visit, that's kind of the first time they're together. What is happening in addition to this conversation is the coach is entering that data of the observations into their tablet. We do this in a structured way that reduces bias, because data as the foundation for this program is really critical, not just to give brands at Hershey the insight into what's happening on their farms, but we also use it operationally. So what's going on with the agronomy is what then informs where the coaches are focusing, what interventions the support partners are bringing to the farming communities. So data as kind of our leg to informed decision making is really critical. And because the coaches focus on observation and not on this judgment, so what is good, what is bad, what we do on the back end is have these observations match the criteria. So this is just an example. This is actually one of the simplest examples in the AO that I've shared. Most of them are multiple pages long, but luckily organic material, a little bit straightforward. So as the coach enters the observations, those observations match to this rating. So if we see certain things in that observation, we either have a good or bad. And essentially that good or bad is just a target state. Good is a target state to reach that 1.5 metric tons per hectare. So that isn't necessarily shared with the farmer. We're not saying this is good, this is bad, right? We're just talking about recommendations. And what is unique in this program is at that point, once that diagnostic visit is finished, the coach can already be issuing recommendations for for improvement. So there is actually feedback. And what I've seen a lot in the development space over years is data collection activities that are completely removed from the farmer, right? So someone shows up on the farm, comes in, collects all this data, asks all these questions, leaves. Farmer doesn't get anything from that experience, never sees that person again, has no idea why they've come and asked. So also the incentive to provide any sort of accurate information is not there because they're not part of the process. And that is what is so different with HIAP. Our coaches are giving feedback to the farmers at that time. Okay, you've invested your time with me to take me around your farm. Let me tell you what I see. Let's see this together and work on something that we can improve the situation of your farm, your productivity, the economies of your household. And of course, we can get more into the details of the agronomy in the next webinar if there's interest. But after those recommendations, that next visit is formalizing the recommendations into actual suggested interventions. And this is the plan that Angela spoke about. We call it the Farm Enterprise Plan. It helps farmers understand the existing condition of their farm, the interventions, the financial investment, the labor requirements, and the commitment over time needed to transform their farm and reach that target level of productivity. So this is really a conversation. So now we know we've diagnosed what's happening, what the physical state of the farm is, what practices are being implemented. And now it's about having a conversation with the family. What are your aspirations? Where are your skills, resources? What's the capacity to make changes over time? And currently farmers, we see they invest very little in their farms, and likewise, they get a very low return on investment, right? So we can't go in and ask farmers to implement all these interventions that'll lead to a diverse agroforestry productive cocoa plot at the onset. That's just not realistic. That investment becomes impractical for farmers to carry on their own, and we don't want to set up this unsustainable workload for change. So to manage this, our planning process prioritizes staggering the interventions and their costs over time. So our real focus, which again, I feel is quite different from being in this space for a while, is to start simple and build over time. We want to take, in this first year of HIAP, a farmer to just focus on one intervention, just one, maybe two. We have the option of two, but really the focus is one because we want the economic reward to trickle to the farmer over time, right? So like just starting with something feasible, it builds up confidence. And it makes this long-term plan actually seem doable rather than dropping 6 different interventions that all need to be handled to get to a high yield immediately. We just know that isn't realistic. And why a lot of these programs fail is because of farmer adoption, a lack of farmer adoption. So at the end of this visit, once this plan is set, the farming family participates. The coach will set up a monitoring timeline with the farmer and family. So by what time is it actually realistic for you to make this change? And then that is the time I will come back and visit the farm. Of course, coaches are available through the implementation period. They're only a phone call away. So here you see kind of 4 visits represented. We actually average 7 or 8 visits, if not more, per farmer, because our coach to farmer ratio is only 1 to 60. For those of you not familiar how this typically works, typically the ratios that I've seen in the tropics in perennial agronomy is around 1 to 250 or 1 to 300. So of course, with that model, you can't get that one-to-one coaching. You don't have tailored approaches to what's happening. And so that is really kind of unique here. So the coach can visit the farmer and check in both from that technical perspective as support is needed and motivationally throughout the duration of the program. So then the really exciting bit in the communities was after this monitoring visit. So the conditionality, the agronomic conditionality in HIAP is really based around you've made a plan, you've committed to one intervention. If you can implement that intervention to a level of good, so again, quality is key here, right? It's not just pruning, it's pruning to a level of quality that is going to do the best for your cocoa farm and build that agroforestry system. So if that is achieved, then the farmer is issued that first agronomic cash transfer. And in this case, it's $300, which is a huge chunk of funds if you think about the average income of cocoa farmers is being under $2,000. So 300 for one practice is quite huge. And this moment is really big in the communities, and one of the quotes, which is both bittersweet to me. A lot of the farmers that we interviewed around this time after this moment said, "You didn't lie to us." um, which was really powerful, right? Because there are so many programs in this space that do not deliver on the results. And so after this and having that trust relationship built with a coach through support over time, having this cash transfer to actually alleviate some of that immediate financial concern was really huge in that community, and really motivated for further action. So just to clarify quickly, so I'm focusing on the agronomic conditionality, that first large CT. There are multiple moments through HIAP where farmers receive or are eligible to receive a cash transfer. One is after, essentially program participation. They have the diagnostic, they agreed, that's $100. They have household members participate in the plan, that would be another $100. The agronomic piece, which I just mentioned, but we also have one around a school attendance incentive. So here we see Ajara, who her family received funds for school fees. September of last year, she was able to attend throughout the year and received a degree of honor. So there are multiple kind of moments throughout HIAP. This isn't the social component we're not focusing so much on, but I did want to highlight that as it is a critical piece of the program and what Hershey's is doing for child well-being and education. So as I mentioned, a lot of this system is not just focused around farmer agency or theory of change, but also how we employ lessons from behavioral science. So the cash transfer component, it's not just about that infusion of cash. It's also acting on kind of multiple layers of human behavior. So we're offering incentive, make a good behavior financially attractive now, reducing the barriers for entry, immediate financial return for that long-term change. The salience, and this is really connected to the plan, keeping goals front and center through conditionality, right? So they make the desired behavior more top of mind. It's just this one intervention. That's all I need to focus on this year. If I do more than that, great, right? But it provides a focus. And cognitive relief, which is really interesting, but only 11% of our beneficiaries in HIAP are at a living income. So that means the majority of our farmers are in extreme poverty or in traditional poverty. So cognitive relief is like poverty consumes bandwidth, right? It's worry, it's stress. And the financial support, that immediate financial support alleviates this, which positively impacts informed decision making and actually thinking about the farm, not just in terms of what can we get for harvest this year, but what are the changes I need to make to the soil, to the canopy, to neighboring crops in order for this to be viable long term. The only other piece I'll kind of highlight here is over time, there's more practices for the same dollar amount, because what we're trying to do is establish norms in the community and have habit formation. So the conditionality works so that in year two, let's say a farmer implements year one weeding, right? They do it to a level of good. Great. They get that cash transfer. Next year, they have to maintain weeding to a level of good and add a new practice. So over time, we're seeing more change on the farm that leads to a more sustainable increase in yield through regenerative practices, but also that same level of kind of investment. So that's that economic trickle that I mentioned, right? Like over time, we want the value of the practices to be showing up so that we don't have that reliance on the cash. In addition, I just did want to mention this year and this program HIAP, we've created a lot of space for innovation. So we have cohorts that have started test out things for the rest of cohorts, and that is scaled to the rest of the farmers in the program. And we're also very opportunistic. So if we know of other things happening in the supply, Hershey's kind of brings that together to deliver more impact for the farm. So this last year, we also had pruning services available. This wasn't just subsidized services, so the farmers did actually need to make a choice and pay for that because we know that these subsidized services do not lead to that change. They're not something farmers can sustain. And it was very successful, and it actually created a bit of a labor market within the communities. Cooperatives want to take on the pruning because it's of higher quality than they're used to. They see that the farmers want to pay for it, and this is a service that they can deliver long term to their members. Da, 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 da. Lastly here, so highlighting those really specific kind of behavioral change and waiting for this slide to shift, which it doesn't. Okay, great. There, now it wants to do it. So today, really, I'm just walking through the process, a little bit of a teaser around the methodology we use, how we focus the farmers. But really, this is to set the stage for a second part where we will share more of the results. We're having them come in right now. I can allude to some, but I can't publish them because my M&E and data specialist is on this webinar. But we are seeing really high adoption rates. We are seeing, I mean, just visibly on these farms. Yep, there she is. We are seeing visibly on these farms, the amount of pods are really kind of striking as someone that's worked in cocoa for years. Like we're taking pictures and sending them around because it's like, can you believe this? So there will be more on that in the second part of this series. But we do have this qualitative insight to share. I put this quote here because it's one of Angela's favorite. But how I want to really conclude this session is to highlight what is different about HIAP than other programs. So our approach is based on the logic of let us show you how to do it and help you achieve it rather than let us do it for you, which is really elemental if we want long-term change on farm that's sustainable, right? That subsidized approaches are not going to sustain change. You have to center the farmer. Our theory of change is built around that farmer agency, and the conditional cash transfers, as I talked about, are informed by behavioral science that over time, more interventions for less money. We want pro-environmental practice adoption. That is the key to success in development efforts, especially in agriculture. Our training focuses on farmer empowerment and autonomy, building relationships of trust. Like we're de-risking and building long-term relationships with the supply, which is also in Hershey's interest to build towards that resilient cocoa and reliable supply chain. We have highly trained, competent coaches on agronomy, creating labor opportunities within community, and a really robust digital data collection system. So that immediate feedback, I didn't get too much into that today, but from coaches to the farmers is one layer, but also having activities that are really informed by the data we see, by the practices and the needs of the farm is really key for designing for the long term. And we're looking at through this program really the efficient rollout of services. So you saw all the activities. Angela talked about all these concentric circles kind of evolving from the farmer. What we're also looking at, and we're partnering with Wageningen University on an impact study right now, but how are these interventions linked, right? Like, is there a bundling effect? Where we can deliver more impact to the farmer based on a combination of intervention. So we're looking at all these things, but really HIAP and this program is focused on building out the system for scaling kind of the best in class. And so as we go on this journey, we want that high quality of everything, but we're also really keen to where's the middle ground, right? What is the quality we really need to drive change for the farmers? What is feasible for them to take on over time? Where is more investment needed? And where do we need to go beyond the bounds of this program? I know a lot of you here are invested in soil science, but I mean, a big component here is that formulation of the soil. If the physical condition is poor, should we actually be recommending cocoa farming, right? So there are a lot of nuances in this, and input, fertilization, how do we get these nutrient mixes that are critical for the long-term success? And a lot of those require investment. So it really goes beyond. Hershey's is making a start, right? And they're making a really solid start. But this creates a pathway, opens up a field for a lot longer intervention needed, more partners from government, from civil society, and from the private sector to really drive these change and move the needle on living income for cocoa farmers. So with that, I think I had one more slide that said exactly what I said, but you guys are smart enough to read, so I don't need to go through it. I think I'll just open it to see if Angela has any additions, and then I think for questions, I know I covered quite a lot. This is a really robust and complex program. But I think it'll be really nice to hear your questions, and also if there's things we can get into more in kind of the second part of this series that are of interest to this community.
Thanks, Jessie. While we allow people to warm up for any questions or clarifications, I just want to underscore a couple of things that you mentioned. And because when I think about, as I was hearing you speak, is from a company point of view, from a private sector point of view, whenever we are faced with these challenges, there's two choices. Either we keep the high bar that we want to achieve, we keep the North Star, and we break the big challenge in steps, baby steps that we can take people along the journey. Or the other option is to lower the bar, and then we can easily achieve results. And that's a very critical choice that companies need to take, is do you lower the bar and show results, and not necessarily having a sustainability strategy for the intervention to continue, or you keep the high bar and you break the challenges step by step. So I just wanted to underscore how important that decision was, because sometimes it's a little bit easier to fall into the first one, to respond to pressure. But the reason why we took as well this journey was because we recognized that we have been doing so much in trying to put efforts in trying to change people's minds and mindset. But there is a limit to what we can do. And I always remember what Peter used to tell us in all of this is, if the farmer and the family do not agree to the problem, do not agree to the solution. And we are seeing a lot of that confirmation. So I don't know if people want to have questions or clarifications. If not, we can certainly continue, but I'm not seeing any key questions so far.
Any questions? If you want to raise your hand, we can remove the mute button. I'm not seeing any either yet. Let's give a minute in case people are thinking.
No problem.
One thing that I can add that makes this program unique is Hershey has really chosen to make a long-term investment in these farming communities. And that is something that is really rare, we know, in the development space, because often programs are 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. But Hershey recognizes that in order to make change that is going to be sustained, it takes a long time. And so they are investing appropriately in the amount of time that it will take. And so that, I think, is a really critical piece to this, is having this partner in Hershey that's willing to invest in the long term, because they know that the farmers are not going to see, we're not coming in and doing interventions for the farmers that quickly increase yield and then pulling out and then having everything go back to how it was a couple years later. They know that the real return for the farmers is going to happen in the longer term, and is ultimately going to extend and sustain well beyond the life of the program. But in order to get there, they're having to make that long-term investment and commitment. And that's something that is really unique in Hershey as a partner for this. And the other piece is, and Jesse mentioned this or alluded to it, is the cash transfers are not designed to cover the exact cost of interventions. We're not intending, the idea is not pay for the intervention. We want the farmers to become comfortable with paying for things on their own. And we are with them on their journey as they start paying for it, start getting their finances in order, start earning the money that they need to continue paying for this. But the idea is we're not paying for everything for them, because then when the funding of the program leaves, the farmer won't have established the practice and the ability of paying. And so that's another piece that's really, really unique about this.
That's a great reminder as well, and because it also brings to life a couple of things for me. If I think about even the comment of how we got to the adoption observations, because we have spoken about, and Jesse has done a great job in walking us through how we use it, what is the rationale and what we are doing there. But one small fun fact, I was part of the Mars team when this was being developed and working with the Rainforest Alliance team or back in the day. And what we had to do to get to this level, where this started was in a very difficult internal conversation where we couldn't measure in a concrete way whether we were tracking against the 2 tons per hectare target that we had in Indonesia. That's where it started. And we had done all the work in the new plantings, and you can imagine we had all the Mars research team in Tarenge in Indonesia, the global R&D teams, and it became a very difficult question, not being able to answer. Yes, we can see the trees are growing, and here are the observations that we can make today to predict how this is going to look like once the tree is mature. And we didn't have that way, because if you go back to the time 2010 or 2013 when this challenge started, the only way that we could answer the question, what is the yield, was by asking the farmer. And that is very unreliable, and there are many conditions that cannot be done. So the fun fact that I just want to share with you is that to do this, we took a lot of data from the R&D teams, and Hussein, he had the most amazing, incredible detailed information about what are the detailed costs to do that you need to set up a cocoa farm, and what are how is it that you can measure. And we took all of these 30 years of data. We tested in Indonesia, we tested in West Africa, and when I accounted for the number of hours and all the teams that were involved, if one person will have done the adoption observations, it will take 256 years. That's the level of expertise that went into this. And now why I'm sharing this is because when we started that journey and starting to try to put some parameters, observable parameters to check adoption rather than relying on farmer recall and interviews, it's because it allows us to have the very different conversation and find different solutions to the challenges that we are facing. But for me, it was also very important that it elevated all the work that the scientists and the R&D teams had done throughout the years, and in a way that field technicians could use it. So that's just something to remind, and look, as you would always hear me say, is like, I'm not a fan of reinventing the wheel. I'm gonna be, if something is good, we will continue to use it. And that's the spirit of this. So if there are no critical questions that come to mind right now, I would really encourage you to reach to the VACS team, and we can definitely adapt the next session to answer to your question, to any follow-up, or if you want to know a little bit more how we did it, what are the challenges or the learnings, we are also happy to share. But I just want to give you even that background of this is coming from a lot. And it's very incredible to see how much knowledge can be packaged in an Excel file that later is being translated in field tablets, apps for field collecting data. And we are not talking about today. So yeah, so that's the only additional detail I wanted to share.
Thank you all so much. I think that's a great point to add that we have the benefit of another session with you all. And so if there's anything that comes up, a question, we'll be distributing this video as well. So please distribute that to your networks to encourage more people to join the next session and have a deeper conversation on what Hershey and HIAP are doing. So if there's nothing for today, I think we can close a little bit early. I just want to thank Angela, Jesse, Kate for all the valuable insights you shared on HIAP. Uh, the whole system and collaborative approach that you've described, I think, offers many valuable lessons for other value chains as well, seeking sustainable impact. So thank you. And we'll get more people onto the next call as well. So as mentioned, the recording of today's session will be on the CIMMYT YouTube channel, along with other previous webinars in the series. So we'll share that link and you can share broadly with your networks. On behalf of the partnership, the FAO CIMMYT CGIAR partnership, thank you for your participation today, and we look forward to continuing these important discussions. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. See you next time.